last week, because we were away at the camp meeting in Tennessee, what I did, I had a recorded sermon, a recorded study prepared on the identity of the beast. I haven't posted that to the YouTube channel yet. I'll put it up this evening. But the week before that, we looked at the first part of Revelation 12. We didn't finish the chapter, so I'm going to complete the chapter this week. But we were about at verse 12. So let's go back and take a quick review. So anyway, this is what we were looking at in Revelation 12. The main players. When I say the main players, I mean the main persons involved in this great controversy in terms of this world. You know, we're not talking about heaven, where God is involved. We are talking about who are the main characters involved in this conflict here in Revelation 12. And what we saw is that the main characters were the woman and the serpent and the seed. God had told Eve, I will put enmity between, told the serpent, I'm sorry, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and the woman's seed. So, right at the beginning, God made Satan know that there would be enmity between himself and somebody who would come from the woman. And of course, this somebody God refers to as a seed, offspring, child. It's interesting, you know, this again gives us an insight into the way prophecy works and the way God speaks, because you can think of God there in the presence of Adam and Eve and Satan, the snake. God says, I will put enmity between you and the woman. So Eve is thinking, this snake is going to be my enemy for the rest of my life. And between your seed and her seed, so she's thinking, I'm going to have a child, and the snake is going to have children. And the child of the snake will be the enemy of my child. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So the child of the snake will damage the foot of my child, and my child will damage the head of the child of the snake. This is Eve, and that is probably most likely how she was understanding the words of God. So you notice when Cain was born, Eve said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And it's not hard to conclude that she believed that this child was the seed that had been promised. Of course, you know that Cain killed Abel, and he clearly wasn't the seed. And Abel wasn't the seed because he was dead. But when Seth was born, she also said, or when she had Seth, sometimes she says, God has given me a seed in place of Abel, whom Cain slew. So the point I'm making is that there was this expectation from the very beginning that a child would be born that would be that would recover what was lost by Adam and Eve. Of course, when Adam and Eve began to grow older and none of their children, it was obvious that none of their children was to be this seed. I suppose the promise passed on to other generations, passed on for generations, and there was a kind of expectation among the women of the Bible that the firstborn child would had the potential to be somebody special. And I think this is a part of the tradition that developed where the firstborn was to get the birthright, and where the firstborn was to get the blessing, because there was the belief that a child was to be born who would be very special. Now, of course, what you can see is that Eve And many generations of those Hebrew women, they believed in a literal human child who would literally, I'm not sure exactly how they figured out the part about the snake. Possibly in the first generation with Eve, they believed it might have been a literal snake. I don't know. But of course, especially during the time of Jesus, a lot of this was clarified. Jesus talked about Satan, who was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. And I suppose when the angel came to Mary and told her that she would have a child, a special child born without a human father, her mind began to go through these promises. Of course, they expected a Messiah, and the word Messiah, the anointed one. I am sure a part of that expectation was this promise made in the Garden of Eden. So now in the book of Revelation, God returns to that theme and God shows us a greater understanding of this prophecy, which maybe a lot of them never really grasped. So what do we see? We saw that there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, being pregnant, cried, travailing in birth and pained to be delivered. So God continues to use the imagery of a woman, and now he's going to show us that the expected child is to be born. But at the same time, he carries through with his illustration, because if a child is to be born, of course there's going to be a pregnant woman, and of course the woman is going to have to go through childbirth pains. So when God is showing us childbirth pains, what he's saying to us is that we have come to the time when this child is to appear. So the church is going through birth pains. And I suppose what we can see is that during this time, the people of God have come to a crisis in history where a lot of troubles are taking place. And the coming of this child has become a matter of top priority for God. And so, as it were, the church is bursting at the seams with the expectation, or with the burden of producing this child. Even though the Jews, for the most part, never understood at the time, and they never knew the Messiah when he came. But the confluence of history, everything that was happening in history at that time, was preparing for the Messiah. I suppose if we look at it carefully, one of the things we will notice is that everything was in place for the Messiah to appear. Some of the factors we are not aware of them, but the Bible says, when the fullness of the time was come, God sent his son, made of a woman, made under the law. So it was the fullness of time. One of the things I've heard commentators say is that at the time when Jesus was born, it was a perfect moment in history. They said that Palestine, that area where Jesus was born, was the crossroads of the world. We know that at that time the world was a small place, the known world. But anybody going to Europe would pass through that area, going to Asia, going to Africa, the three continents that were known in that day. If you wanted to pass from one to the other, you passed through that part of the world. So it was a crossroads of the world where anybody passing through would hear any significant news that was taking place. So the Messiah being born at that spot means that it was a perfect place for the message of Christ to spread out around the world. So that was one factor. The fact that the world was so desperate for answers. The Jews themselves had been without a prophet for, I think it was 600 years. They had not had a prophet for, I think, 600 years. And so, they were under Roman yoke. There was a desperate desire for things to change. And just in passing, I would say, I kind of think we are at a similar place in today's world. One of the things that people consider to be a curse is the internet and social media and the ability to monitor people. But along with all of that, there is the reality that we are also living at a point in time when there has never been a greater ability to transfer information. It's just that sometimes we don't take advantage of these facilities. I'm one of the persons who is guilty of that. I mean, we have a presence on YouTube, we have a website, but I honestly, I know that I'm not enough of an advertiser. I'm not enough of a seller. I could sell our message and our work more aggressively if I really put my mind to it. And I am thinking about it and planning for it too. But what I'm saying is that we are at that point in time where the situation is perfect for the message to reach the entire planet. And to some extent, it is happening. The videos that we put out are reaching people in every corner of the world. It's just that it's reaching hundreds instead of millions, instead of billions. So, along with the evil that the technology is used for, there is a great potential for good. And so, in this way, it's kind of like similar to the time of Jesus. It's like we have come to the birth pangs of the new age. The, 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 the demand for the kingdom. Just like the times were demanding the arrival of this Messiah, this promised seed. The times were demanding this seed at the time when he came. So the times are demanding the kingdom of God. It's a verse that Daniel used recently, and Howard like to use it as well. There's a verse in Romans 8 which says that the whole creation is groaning in travail because it is waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. And if I may reword that, it is waiting for the revelation of the kingdom of God, the sons of God through the kingdom of God. The world is at that point in time where the creation is groaning for the manifestation of this that we have been studying about, because we're at that moment in time. So we have come to another time when the confluence of history and the confluence of events are telling us that it is time for the seed to be manifested again. So anyway, this is what was happening at this time when it says the woman was in childbirth. She was travailing in birth and she pained to be delivered. The world and nature and the times were crying out for the seed. So the time had come. We can't maybe answer all the questions as to why was it the fullness of the time, but we can look at a few things and come up with some ideas. At the same time, there appears another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And we saw that this person, of course, is Satan. What is he doing? His tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be devoured, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. So here is the conflict of the woman, the serpent, and the seed, straight from the Garden of Eden, straight from Genesis. God brings it back to us in the book of Revelation. You might say, as it was in the beginning, so it is at the end. But what we see here is actually God showing us that the promise in Eden, this was the meaning, this was the fulfillment. The woman is about to bring forth a child, and this child, the serpent or Satan will damage him, but he will crush the serpent's head. Now we know that, of course, this child is Jesus. She brought forth a man child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Clearly, the ascension and the glorification of Jesus. Now, one of the things we need to understand, and this is a carryover from what we were looking at this morning, one of the things we need to understand is the threefold work of Jesus Christ. Again, I think in our emphasis on this, we are somewhat ahead of many other Christians. Many of them look at what Jesus did at Calvary and they end the story there. But we understand that was a revelation of God's character and the salvation of humanity, or the saving of humanity, or the redemption of humanity, or the ransoming of humanity, however you want to put it. But then that was phase one. There is phase two, which is the glorification, the vindication of God's government and God's kingdom, which is Jesus doing it again through humanity. Jesus accomplishing the second part of his work in fighting the battle to restore God's kingdom. The second part is through the church, through the kingdom, where he will continue this process of crushing the head of the serpent. And that's what the book of Revelation is about. And that's where we are in this moment of time. So the child was caught up to God and to his throne. And something happened afterwards now that intensified the conflict. And what was that? There was war in heaven. And Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and they prevailed not. Neither was their place found anymore in heaven. So we have emphasized this self-evident point. A point that is self-evident because it only takes a second to think about it and realize it's true. And what that point is that this war in heaven was not what you see depicted on the screen. On the screen, you see angels with drawn swords using force against one another. And we recognize that that cannot have been the nature of the conflict, because on one side is God and the agencies of God, and no evil power, no contrary power can stand before God for a moment if the contest is a contest of strength. So we have concluded that the contest that is taking place is a contest of information, it's a contest of ideas, it's a contest of truth versus falsehood. That's the essence of this conflict, and that is why judgment is so important, to reveal the truth. This is why the way the battle is fought, we need to understand, and that we use our weapons accordingly. I think that's one area in which we all need to be somewhat more informed and somewhat better prepared in that area of understanding how we fight and the weapons that we use in this conflict. But anyway, so the picture I have here is misleading, but it's helpful because it highlights a battle. But it's necessary to point out it's not a physical battle, it's not a battle with physical weapons. So this is what intensifies the conflict, because it says in verse 9, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. God makes sure that he puts in the word serpent. You would say, why doesn't he just refer to him as the devil and Satan? But because he wants to connect this with the Garden of Eden. He goes back to give you his original identity as that old serpent which deceiveth the whole world. And again, you know, I should say something. I will say something. You know, when Satan's assault against humanity is described in this verse, notice what God highlights. He deceives the whole world. In Peter describes Satan as a roaring lion who goes around seeking whom he may devour. But what we need to understand is that the real danger with Satan is not that he will physically destroy you. Satan's real tools that he uses against us, his real weapons, is not so much that you need to be afraid to walk at night because ghosts will ambush you and throw you down, or that evil spirits will come and lock their fingers around your neck at night, or that, in some way, evil spells will be cast on you. This is not the real or not the primary danger of the devil. Notice what God says. He's trying to destroy like a roaring lion, but look how he does it. He deceives the whole world. Satan's great tool, whether in heaven or on earth, is the tool of deception. Why do you think he was able to drag 1/3 of the angels in heaven with him? What did he use? Threats, promises. What he used was deception. He deceived them concerning the true character, nature of God. That's what he used. And I put it to you that here on this earth also, the greatest the greatest weapon of Satan is deception. Primarily, he deceives us about God, but he extends that deception into other areas that are related. So we should understand that if this is so, then God's greatest weapon against Satan is the truth. And this would explain why Jesus says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." It also highlights the reason why Jesus says, "I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life." It further emphasizes why, the Apostle John would say, "For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ," because truth is God's weapon in this conflict against Satan. Satan's weapon is deception. He deceives the whole world. For 4,000 years was very successful, but Jesus arrived with the truth. And then it was time for the mask to be taken away from his face. And that's why he was kicked out of heaven, because the truth exposed him. In verse 10 it says, "And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." And obviously, we are looking at what happened here at Pentecost, where salvation, strength, and the kingdom of God came to the people of God. But if you look at the last part of the verse, also you can see the highlight as to how Satan is fighting. He is the accuser of our brethren, and Satan is not only a deceiving liar in terms of the lies he tells about God, but also in how he operates concerning people. When I was a little boy, I was 4 years old. I met a woman. 4 years old, I met a woman who operated on the principles of Satan. I mean, my mother had about four small children. You must know she multiplied rapidly. The first brother was born in 1950, and the fifth brother was born in 1955. So every year she had one boy. The second one was born in 51. I was born in 52. Dan was born in 54, and Charles was born in 55. And our first sister was born in 56. So they had a whole troop of little tiny children running around the house. So my father at that time was still a minister, so they could afford. She had a helper, and the girl came to work with us, the young lady, if I can call her that. And this woman was perverse. One day she came to me quietly and she says, "Say this word." She told me to say a bad word. My father had it ingrained in us not to say bad words, not to use improper language. I mean, of course, I was a minister's son. I was only 4. To me, it was the greatest sin in the universe to use certain words. She said, "Say this word." I said, I, I can't say that. That's a bad word. She said, "I'll give you a shilling." Those days, a shilling was a lot of money. I'm a little boy. I have no idea to think about this woman's motives. I don't know what is going on. She said, "I'll give you a shilling." And my little 4-year-old, I said the word. She went straight to my father and told him I had said this word. I thought I was horrified, thinking the world would fall on my head. My father gave me a long lecture, and then he took soap and water and washed out my mouth. The worst of it was the embarrassment, but I mean, soap and water, I did nothing. But my father was, he wanted to make the point, but he didn't want to hurt me. He washed out my mouth with soap and water. So I was too terrified and too little and too foolish to tell my father what had really happened. But I always wonder what motivated this person to do something like that to a little boy. And it makes me think of Satan. Satan, he presented his deceptions to the people of God, and as soon as they fell, what did he do? He went before God to accuse them. He did exactly what this woman did to me. He went before God to accuse the people that he had deceived into letting down God, if you may put it that way. He loved to accuse the people of God, and that was his job. Now, sometimes he had a point. I mean, the people of God, they couldn't help themselves. They were carnal. They might have been converted, but they were not born again. So they could fight and they could try, but they still were defeated at times. And so he came to accuse them before God. And he had a point. But then Jesus came and Jesus died. And Jesus, now he has no more accusation, because every time he brings an accusation against God's people, all that God presents is Jesus. No matter what you can say, it is covered by my son. There's a verse in Isaiah, I think it's 54, it says, every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment, thou shalt condemn. Every tongue that rises against you in judgment, you will condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Yeah, anticipating what would happen when Jesus came. So now Satan's mouth is shut. He has no more argument. And so he's kicked out of heaven. That's a part of the reason. Not only has he been exposed to be a God murderer, it is seen that his real intention is to murder God. They saw what he did with Jesus. His schemes are exposed. His real character is made known. God's character is seen on the cross. Satan's accusations are silenced. He's kicked out of heaven. But now he comes down here with, in a murderous rage, determined to do all the damage he can do. It says, therefore rejoice ye heavens, in verse 12, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. I suppose you could say that short is relative, because 2,000 years, that's a very, very long time for somebody like me. But if you think of somebody who has lived for ages, millennia, which is how long, obviously, Satan has lived, 2,000 years is a short space. So the time is relative, even relative to the beginning of this world's history. 4,000 years passed when Satan basically walked up and down like he owned the place. But now he's kicked out and he knows my time is limited. So if he was furious before, now he is absolutely enraged, and it's like it's like a man who has been accused of something and he's trying to defend himself. But when he's exposed, he grabs a weapon and starts to slaughter everything in his path. He has no more need to conceal his intentions or his nature. He just starts knocking down everything. You have seen people like that. It's something like this the Bible says is happening to Satan. And if you wonder, why would a highly intelligent being behave in such a mindless, you know, animal type of way? And the reality is this. This is what we need to get in our minds, and not us only, but everybody in the world, that wisdom, education, a high IQ is not the basis of good behavior. These are the facades that make people think that they are dealing with something worthwhile, but the only basis for good is God. And we can see that when we consider the behavior of some of the most prominent political systems in the world. Some of the people that are most admired, they are the dirtiest, most thieving, most scurrilous scoundrels on the planet. We have seen people like Hitler, and Hitler was a reflection of what exists in many places, in many leagues. But I mean, he had the opportunity to let it out. A lot of them don't. But the point I'm making is that, I heard somebody say something last night. I was listening to a debate between this woman who became a Christian, and not a debate, a discussion, but one of the things she said is that what is happening in the world today, she assessed it and it made sense. She says that they started to be critical of religion because of the inroads of evolution, and then because they wanted to be politically correct, they would bend over backwards to please Islam. But because we live in a Christianized society, they were very hard on Christianity. It got to the place where Christianity became an enemy, and Islam is now taking over the West because it is politically incorrect to be critical of Islam while it is popular to assault Christianity. And she says the result of this kind of reshaped society is showing itself in the perversions where they are embracing the absolute absurdities and stupidities, like a man can be a woman, and like transgenderism, and males in female sports, and the absolute absurdities. You have 100 different genders. She says what we know. This is lunacy, and yet it is promoted by the most educated, quote unquote, people in society. It's interesting how she was analyzing the situation and the conclusions as to how this developed. But the point is that this has created an environment which is perfect for the devil and his systems to flourish, because the world is, as 200 years ago, the world, the Western world, was a Christian place. Now, we had a lot of evils taking place, no question about that, but everybody, more or less, in the Western world respected the Bible, and it was the basis of society. You had good families. You had a lot of some of the lunacy that happens. People just step into a school and start shooting mindlessly. This kind of madness did not happen in a world where Christianity was dominant. But the point is, the world is at a place where the things it admires and the things it reveres and holds up are the greatest evils in existence if you think about it. The only basis for good is God. Drive him out of the society, and what is left is absolute lunatic evil. That's the kind of world that we are rapidly that rapidly advances upon us. This is the kind of world. So when it says the devil has come down having great wrath, I mean, again, the basis of his promotion is deception. But isn't it the greatest deception, his masterful plan, that the greatest disgrace, the greatest danger to humanity, he has allowed humanity to elevate it to the highest place? Isn't that the pinnacle of deception? So the greatness of his wrath is manifested in the state of society today. That's what I would say. Anyway, so he knows that he has a short time, and so he has intensified his efforts. If his plans come about because he and his evil angels are holding committee meetings, I suppose they have a meeting every evening or every morning. They are working out ways to destroy all of us through deception. Now, it goes on to say in verse 14 that the woman was given two wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. Now, because I believe that this woman represents the church that brought forth Jesus Christ. When I say the church, I know the Christian church had not yet been established, but God had a congregation then. The Jewish nation up to this time was recognized as God's people. We understand that the Jewish nation was an incubator. It was a box that God created because he had a purpose, that this box, out of this nest, his son should come. It was intended to produce the Messiah. So in this sense, it was the church of God. But now, this church morphed into the New Testament church, or the New Testament church came out of it. But it still continues to be described as a woman because the lineage is there of an entity that God is working with, a continuous lineage in that sense. Now, the woman is given two wings of a great eagle. And what is the meaning of this wings of an eagle? Well, this is a symbolism that God uses in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of Exodus, and in other places. But let's look at the one in Exodus 19 where God says specifically, where is it? In verse 4. God speaking to Moses and the Israelites. You have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bear you on eagle's wings, and I brought you unto myself. God specifically does not just say wings. He says, I carried you on the wings of eagles. And of course, obviously, God never carried them on eagle's wings. So he's using eagle's wings as symbols to represent something. What he means is that I have protected you. I've given you, in a way, I gave you abilities that enabled you to escape from Egypt. I took you on eagle's wings. And I think maybe the imagery of how an eagle is majestic and she is able to protect her young ones, some of that is there. God says, I took you on eagle's wings. But the point is that God specifically says eagle's wings. And so the wings of an eagle they become a symbol of God's protection and guidance. God's protection and guidance are represented by eagle's wings. So when we come to the book of Revelation specifically, and God says that he gives the woman the two wings of an eagle, what it means is that God is protecting her and God is guiding and directing her. Now, there are two things to remember. First of all, is that there are two concepts of the church. Two concepts of the church are two concepts of the kingdom. When we talk about the church, we are talking about the kingdom of God. We're talking about the temple of God. Because all of these labels are given to God's business in the book of Revelation. The temple, the kingdom, and the church. They're all used to describe God's people, God's movement, God's tool, God's agency in the book of Revelation. So all of those are legitimate names. So when we talk about the church, though, there are two things to remember. There is the true church that is made up of those who are born again, and there is the public church, which is made up of all who claim the name of Christ. Two things, two concepts. Now, those who claim the name of Christ include the tares, include the foolish virgins. They claim the name of Christ and they are in the kingdom. They're a part of the public church of Christ. And in some cases, God is looking at the church or the kingdom in this way, made up of good and bad. In the parables of Jesus, this is very clear. But in another perspective, the church is made up only of those who are born again. If any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. So in Revelation 12 here, when we're looking at this woman, we are looking not at the public church. We are looking at the invisible church. We are looking at the church as God sees it. The church that God is protecting. And why am I making this point? Because we're not talking about the Roman Catholic Church here. The Roman Catholic Church is a part of the Christian body, Christendom, a part of the kingdom. They are well, we would say many of them are the tares among the wheat. The system itself is corrupt, is false. We are not looking at them. They are not the ones that God gave wings like an eagle. We are looking now at the true people of God who were faithful to him and who were seeking to serve him according to their consciences in spirit and in truth. They are represented here as this woman who goes into the wilderness because she is protected by eagle's wings. She is guided, carried by eagle's wings, and she's carried into the wilderness. Not the public church, but the secret church, if we may call it that way. So I hope we can understand that distinction that I'm trying to make there. Now it says she's nourished, she's taken care of for a time and times and half a time. Now this time period comes up so many times in the book of Revelation, and it's one of the difficulties that, let me put it bluntly, it's one of the difficulties I have in explaining, because there are some times when it seems clear that it is talking about a literal time period, literally 1260 days. As a matter of fact, in the same chapter, chapter 12, and there are times when it seems evident that it is talking about prophetic time period, a day for a year. In this particular case, it seems clear to me that it is referring to a day for a year. It's talking about the time when the church, the Christian church during the dark ages, was not able to function in a public way. God's true people had to be hidden in solitary places because the Roman Catholic Church persecuted all who would not submit to her dominance and her teachings. So the true Christian church was hidden away. And that time period of 1,260 days, I believe, really applies to the time of the dominance of the papacy. Now, if somebody is to ask me, how do you explain and rationalize those differences, those different way of interpreting these time periods? The honest truth is, I don't have a good answer. Okay? And I will tell everybody that clearly so you can be reminded that I'm not I'm not pretending to be infallible. I am hoping and I'm expecting I will find a way to explain it, a way that is consistent and a way that makes sense. I am hoping, but at the moment I don't have that. And I know that this opens the door for all kinds of speculation, but that's just the truth. And if you go back to Revelation 11, for example, you will see where it says, I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,203 days, clothed in sackcloth. I believe this to be literal time. And then you go to the next chapter, and it says the woman was given two wings of a great eagle. She goes into the wilderness that they should feed her there 1,203 days. The same time period is used. And this is one of the reasons why, let me call the name. Some people don't like when I do, but the Adventist Church takes a historicist view of Revelation. What I mean is that everywhere it mentions 42 months, 1260 days, times and a half, they say it refers to the past. They say every time that time period comes up in any of these forms, 1260 days, 42 months, times and a half, it refers to those dark ages when the papacy reigns supreme. That's what the Adventist Church says. And it satisfies a lot of those who study these prophecies. It does not satisfy me. There are places where it just does not fit. So when I look at the context, I can say this is prophetic time and this is literal time. But I believe we need a better rule by which to make that decision. And as I said, we're still looking for that rule. Now that's one of the hard questions in the book of Revelation that I can't answer at the moment yet. Okay? But anyway, I'm being very open and frank in admitting that to all of us. So the Christian church, the true church, goes into the wilderness. When I say the true church, I don't mean a denomination. I mean those who are born again, those who are true children of God. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Now, uh,
I have a
water.
question, Brother David.
All right, go ahead, brother Ian.
Um, are you saying that with the woman, the woman flying to the wilderness for a time and times and time is not historic? Are you saying it is going to be or has been?
No, I'm saying it has been. I'm saying that that is historic.
Okay.
So if somebody applies this in a historical way, I would agree with that, right?
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yes. Um, so water, as we know, is used consistently in the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation to refer to an abundance of people. And probably the definitive verse, if we are looking for an actual verse, is all right, somebody needs to mute. All right. The definitive verse is Revelation.
What's this?
Do I have? Let me mute for everybody.
What's this?
All right. Somebody can't find the mute button. Um, Mute everybody. It's even harder to mute in this program than the first one. I have no idea why they switched. All right. So, right. I was saying that in Revelation 17 and verse 15, we're told very clearly. And he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So God tells us very clearly that waters represent multitudes of people, different nations. So this is consistent. We can apply this rule consistently in the book of Revelation and probably in the book of Daniel as well, in the prophecies of Daniel. So it says, where are we now? We are down to verse 15. Okay. The serpent cast out water out of his mouth as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And this is very simple to understand. And it makes a lot of sense because what we're told here is that Satan raised up persecution against the woman, the true church, the church in the wilderness. He used masses of people, armies of people to try to destroy that church. And this is true according to the record of history. We know how many crusades were launched against the we can call the names the Waldenses, the Albigenses, the different groups who would not conform to the perverted ideas of Rome and who would not submit to the Pope. Crusades were launched against these people, and masses of them were murdered. I don't have any idea how to check the record of history. I know that some commentators say as many as 60 million people were slaughtered during those ages. But I've seen where some have said 100 million. That's almost double as much. So I don't know who to believe. But we're looking at different authorities. So I just can conclude that it was masses of people. So the dragon cast water out of his mouth to try to destroy the woman. And that's exactly what we see happening when we look at the record of history. But it goes on to say, no, we missed a verse. I missed a verse. Let me go to the Bible to pick up on that verse. In verse 16, it says, and the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Now we can look at this in one of two ways. First of all, if when it says the earth helped the woman, it could signify that because the woman was able to hide in the wilderness, or the true believers were able to hide out in wilderness places, they were able to escape this flood that the dragon was casting after them. But let me give you another suggestion, which I lean towards more. If you go to the next chapter, which is Revelation 13, look on the right panel. It says in verse 11, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. Notice again, it speaks about the earth. And he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Now we can ignore that part. I want to focus on the earth. It says the same thing over here. It says the earth helped the woman. So it's not every single time that you meet upon the same phrase that it means exactly the same thing. But most of the time in the book of Revelation, that is true. There's a consistency. If it says earth here, it means the same thing over there. Most of the time. So in chapter 13, on the right, the earth here I understand to mean the new world, America, the Americans, the part of the world that had not yet been known in biblical times. The water represents that old part of the world with nations and multitudes and peoples, which was typical of the old world, Africa, Europe, the Middle East. That was the old world. The earth primarily focused on the new world, what we call the new world. So it's consistent because when you go again to the left panel, chapter 12, verse 16, it says the earth helped the woman. And what we can see from the record of history is that when persecution became unbearable in Europe, well, I mean, it was always unbearable. But how did how did Protestantism find a way to begin to progress and to develop in an unhindered way? And one massive way was because America opened up, and many of the people in Europe and in England who were Protestants migrated to America. America became, as it were, a breeding ground for the development of Protestantism, a breeding ground for the development of independent religious ideas where people could now look at the Bible, think about what the Bible means, and flourish in developing in that way. It's true that it was also, some of this was taking place in Europe. I mean, in the days of John Wesley and George Whitefield and his brother Charles Wesley, they were these ideas of Protestantism were taking over. But the Wesleys were badly persecuted, and so was George Whitefield. But it certainly was not like during the Dark Ages. Things were changing, but I think consistency says that we should apply this term, the earth, to the New World. I know that there were many atrocities in the New World. There was slavery, and in America, at one period, they were burning people that they claimed to be witches. In some ways, the intolerance was almost as great as in Europe. But the whole point was that they were beginning to develop a concept and a social structure where they could have a church without a pope and a society without a king. And these were the elements that were necessary for fresh ideas to flourish and develop and grow. I mean, today there is all kinds of lunacy in America and in this part of the world. And I suppose that's a part of the product of this kind of liberty and freedom. But at the same time, it also made for the development of some ideas that were very useful to the Christian world. All right, so then it goes on to say in verse 17, and the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. That's the last verse of chapter 12, and we will probably comment on this verse and then we will stop for the evening. But there's a lot that can be commented on this verse. There are so many changes of terminology in this verse alone, so many nuances there. We can say a lot about it. So let's just look at a few of these things. First of all, the dragon is angry with whom? He's angry with the woman. And there's so much that needs to be said. I should highlight some of the things here. I hope my highlighter shows up better than this morning. All right, the dragon is angry with the woman. All right, so the original contention is still there. If you can see my highlight, just say yes. Can you see the highlight I put on the screen?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. The dragon was angry with the woman, but he goes to make war with the remnant of her seed. This is a strange turn of events because, all right, it says that the dragon is angry, he goes to make war with the woman, and then the earth helps the woman. And what I'm saying is that the church basically kind of migrates to a different part of the world where
Brother David.
the dragon is not able to persecute her there. But he's angry with the woman, and instead he goes to make war with the remnant of her seed. Now think about this. If where the woman is hiding is a certain part of the world, so the earth helps the woman, so the dragon cannot catch the woman. Then where is the seed? Where is the remnant of her seed? Obviously, whoever this remnant of her seed is, they should be in the same part of the world as the woman. They should be in a similar situation as the woman. Why doesn't he make war with the woman, but instead he goes to make war with the seed of the woman? So God is not saying that you know Satan cannot catch the woman, so he goes to catch the seed. That cannot be what he's saying, because wherever the woman is, it stands to reason that the seed will be in the same place. So there's a reason why he no longer persecutes the woman and he turns on the seed. And my own conclusion is that the people of God are now being looked at in a different way. At one point, the church was seen as the woman. But now, at the point in time that we are speaking about, the church is being seen as the seed. And what I understand this to mean is that the kingdom, or the church, or the temple, or the sanctuary, whatever we want, those people of God are now so connected to Jesus Christ, so like Jesus, so much an expression of Jesus, so much a conduit for Jesus to reveal himself, that they are no longer looked upon as the woman, they are now looked upon as the seed, or as a part of the seed. In other words, Jesus has replicated himself in these people. This was not true when the church was still seen as the woman. Seen as the woman, yes, they were faithful, they were up in the hills, they were being persecuted and so on. But the understanding of those people, and the revelation of the kingdom through these people was so limited, so much unlike God's ideal, that they were still seen as the woman. But now we come to the end of time, and God sees fit to redescribe them. God is pointing to the spiritual condition of his people at the end, which is the closest thing to the image of Christ that the church has ever seen, that the world has ever seen. These are the people against whom the dragon goes to make war. He's not making war with any denomination upon the earth at this moment. No denomination is worthy of any special attention. They are all playthings in the hands of the dragon. He's interested in something that threatens his existence. He's interested in what can crush his head and bind him in the bottomless pit. And the only thing that can do this is the remnant of the woman's seed. This, brothers and sisters, has not yet been manifested, has not yet appeared in its true state. But all of us in this room, I believe, desire to be a part of that remnant of the seed. And the last part of the verse, it says that this remnant of the woman's seed is characterized because they keep the commandments of God, and number two, they have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, it is a travesty, it is a perversion of the truth to suggest that this is saying that these people keep the Ten Commandments. If this is true, you might as well put the Jews in the picture. This is because legalism makes people limit the commandments of God to a set of 10 statements. But the whole point of this description is that God is saying to us that these people have become so identified with Christ that they are responsive to everything that the Lord wants of them. Keep the commandments of God are not a statement that says you conform to the 10 rules that I put before you. No, keeping the commandments means you and I are in such a connection that anything that you say to me, whatever you require of me, Lord, you have it. I'm sensitive to you. I'm a part of your program. My ears are open to you. My eyes are upon you. Anything that you desire of me, I am your servant. Keeping the commandments of God is an attitude and a relationship with Christ, not a relationship with a set of rules. That's the point. And then the last thing is that they have the testimony of Jesus Christ. The testimony of Jesus, as all of us know, is the spirit of prophecy. And where do we find this? We find this in Revelation 19. Revelation 19, let's just look at it since we are discussing this. Revelation 19, and I think it's verse 10. John falls down to worship an angel, and the angel says, "See thou do it not. I am your fellow servant, and I am of your brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy." Now, the angel says to John that I am one of your brothers. And he says, furthermore, I'm one of your brethren, your brothers who have the testimony of Jesus. So, in other words, the angel is saying, I have the testimony of Jesus, just like your brothers, the rest of your brothers. Is the angel saying, I have the writings of Ellen White? The people who say that the testimony of Jesus is the writings of Ellen White or the gift of Ellen White, I mean, that is another absolute perversion of the truth. The angel is not saying, I have a selection of Ellen White's books or Ellen White's CDs. What he's saying is that I have the gift of prophecy. I have the gift of prophecy, just like the rest of your brethren. When the Bible says that the remnant of the seed, they have the testimony of Jesus Christ, what God is saying is that they are prophets. And so the angel can say, I'm one of them. I also have the gift of prophecy. So it's legalism that limits this gift of prophecy to one person, to one set of writings, when God intends that it should be for every person who is one of the remnant. I'm not saying every Christian who lives or who has ever lived. It has peculiar application to the remnant. Now, let me just highlight this and reemphasize it a little bit more. If you look at chapter, I'm now in chapter 22 of Revelation. Okay, chapter 22. The verse we just looked at is in chapter 19, where the angel says, don't worship me. I'm one of your brothers that have the testimony of Jesus. So if you go to Revelation 22 and verse 8, look at what happens. First of all, let me go back to the left panel, chapter 19. John says, I fell at his feet to worship him. And he says, don't do it. I am your fellow servant. I'm one of your brothers who have the testimony of Jesus. John should have learned his lesson, but I'm telling you, we can forgive him, and God forgives him because he's so overwhelmed. In Jamaica, we would say, you turn fool, right? When something so unexpected and striking happens to you and blows you away, and you begin to do stupid things, they say you turn fool. All right. So John turned fool. He's blown away by what he's seeing, and he forgets. And so he does the same thing again. In verse 8, it says, and I, John, saw these things, and I heard them. And when I had heard and seen, again he does it. I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel which showed me these things, just like he did in chapter 19. And the angel reminds him, probably gently. Then he said to me, see thou do it not. Didn't I just tell you not to do it? And again, he reminds him, for I am your fellow servant, and I am one of your brothers, the prophets. Same exact scenario, same exact words. Over here, the angel says, I'm one of those who have the testimony of Jesus. And he says the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And now he tells us straight. He doesn't go around through testimony of Jesus, spirit of prophecy. He just comes straight and says, I am one of your brothers. I'm one of your brothers who are the prophets. No question. The remnant in Revelation 17 are prophets. It's not talking about any denomination or any remnant church. It's talking about God's last day people who will be prophets and who will keep the commandments in that they respond to everything that the Lord Jesus tells them to do. Now, this is perfectly in keeping with scriptural revelation. If you go to Joel chapter 2, where it talks about in the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. What does he say will happen? He says, your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. The gift that he promises is the gift of prophecy. In the last days, when he pours out his spirit upon all flesh, every one of us will be prophets. In 1 Corinthians chapter 14, look at what the Apostle Paul says when he talks about spiritual gifts. Look at what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 14. He says, follow after charity. Let me use another version. I hate when it says charity. NIV. Okay, NIV. The cursed version, but I mean, it's a simple verse. No way of making any mistakes. Follow the way of love and eagerly desire gifts of the Spirit, especially prophecy. Why would the outstanding apostle tell us that the greatest gift to be desired is the gift of prophecy? And there are others. For example, in the Old Testament, when the spirit of prophecy was upon Moses and upon Aaron, when God came down and gave that gift to, I think, was it 70 men? 70 men that they were supposed to be with, and two of them remained in the camp. Two of them didn't come, and the spirit fell on them in the camp. And Joshua was concerned because he thought this was breaking protocol. He ran to Moses and says, my Lord Moses, Meldad and Edad are prophesying in the camp. Forbid them. And Moses said, are you envious for my sake? Would to God that all of God's people were prophets, and that God will put his spirit upon them. That was the wish of Moses, the man of God. He seemed to understand that the gift of prophecy was one of the most to be desired gifts of all the gifts. Paul says it, and finally at the end, God promises it and God gives it. God's remnant have the spirit of prophecy. And it is unfortunate that some people have limited that to the ministry of one person, one woman. Very unfortunate. But when we look at the Bible with unbiased eyes, it is clear that this is a misapplication of the truth. So that brings us to the end of our time for this evening. I'm going to post this plus
I have a
the video
question
that
there, brother.
I'm coming. I'm going to post this plus the video that we shared last week on identifying the beast, and then next week we'll pick up from there. But this brings us to the end for this evening. Go ahead, Brother Ian. Dario, if the old one is working for you, keep it. I wish the old one would work for me, but it's not working. So go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, but it's not. I don't know if it's so much a question. It's really an observation. Something just hit me while we look at the last few verses of Revelation 12. The dragon was wroth with the woman, and he went to make war against the remnant of the seed, which keeps the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. And then chapter 13, we see a beast coming up out of the water. So it occurs to me, just occurred to me that the beast only emerges when the remnant is of the seed comes into existence.
Yeah,
It's
he
after the
begins to.
remnant of the sea comes into, yeah, into existence that the beast actually emerges, or comes up out of the water. That's how he makes war against the remnant.
Or I would say he re-emerges because he was and is not yet is. So he begins to manifest himself again when the remnant emerges. I agree with that.
Okay.
Yes, Sister Talia, you can go ahead.
Brother David, you be having me on my toes. Um, to uh, to what Brother Eon, uh, just asked. Um, are we referring to Satan himself or Babylon, the system? When you guys are what you guys are talking about, I just wanted some clarity on that first.
Okay, Sister Talia. When we talk about the beast, when we come to Revelation chapter 17, and actually the video that I did last, we was played last week, actually looks at some of those questions. But the beast is a tool that Satan uses and has been using for generations, for thousands of years. So, but the beast shows itself up in different ways. The beast is not Satan; it's the kingdom that Satan is using. So,
Which is
at the end of time, it's Europe and the United States.
okay. Got it. And I had some idea, but I just needed to understand it fully. Um, so you the last thing you mentioned was with regards to how all all these things are going to manifest. themselves. You know what? Let me grab my thoughts together again because some of it had left me because I had several questions to ask, but I'll let the next person go and then come back to me, please.
Okay, Sister Talia, I think it's back to Brother Ian. Go ahead, Ian.
Sorry, that was inadvertent.
All right. Sister Esther, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that it says that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So, if the spirit of prophecy is in God's last day church, it's because they have his spirit.
Absolutely. Yes. The spirit of prophecy is one gift of the spirit. It's impossible to have the spirit of prophecy without having the Holy Spirit. And that's why it's a travesty that some people label the spirit of prophecy as a person or as a particular set of writings. They want to limit the spirit of God, and that is unfortunate. All right, we have Brother Judah, then Sister Talia, then Brother Ken.
Yes, my brother. I really value particularly the explanation that the beast makes war with the remnant of her seed. Many a time, because I can speak for myself, because of my nurturing in Adventism and the fixation on the remnant church, and on we sometimes miss that. But you really highlight and tie it up with Colossians. I believe it's Colossians. It says, "Christ in us, the hope of glory." It's not the woman, the church, but the church has finally reached the point where, as you said, perfectly reflects Christ. So it's Christ in us, the remnant. So that verse just ties in nicely with Colossians and the understanding that really it's not I but Christ. It's the church fully at the point where it has matured and it's reflective of Christ, so much so that Christ is manifest again in her. That's just a beautiful point that I've never heard it explained in such a, I mean, unassailable, if I may say so. It's just, I'm happy for that. God is good. God is good.
Praise the Lord. The last word is the best word. God is good. Um, yeah, then Sister Talia, then is it Brother Ken afterwards?
I got I got it, brother David. First, I want to say I love you, and
Love you too.
I love a lot of the things that you're saying. And I come from uh, uh, a background. I don't even know if you know what background I came from. But nevertheless, I want to understand something because I'm in a conundrum here for two things that you stated. One is the fact that I don't get it because from what I read in the Bible, for every generation, there is a prophet. Now, the last thing you spoke of was, and I get it. I get the fact that um, from what you said that the last remnant church or the saints will be prophets. I get that, but it doesn't, in my opinion, negate the fact that for every generation God, when the people of God began to apostatize, he sent them a prophet. And so, I also get the fact that, there's been some, perversion of Sister White's writings. I get that if it's a choice, but I understand from based on what the Bible reads that there's always a prophet for each generation. So I'm thinking that, and I could be wrong, that in order for the Seventh Day Adventist movement to get to the point that they are here today, because everything that has happened through the events from 1844 with the institutions and stuff, and the information that we receive from, for example, the health message and so on, came from her writings. And I know, like I said, there's been perversion of her writings and stuff like that, but that's not to negate, and she wasn't even supposed to be the prophet, because two of the other guys, as we all know, well, one couldn't because of, we won't talk about that, and the other one just was fearful. So, and those were the men, um that they didn't do the work that Sister White had done in providing us some of the inspiration that made this church what it is today, so we can even have the information. So whether, we don't want to use Ellen G. White or not, in my understanding, she was a prophetess for the time that she was needed for, notwithstanding that in the end, as we proceed forward, there won't be prophets as the last day remnant church. Does that make sense? And once you got that, I was left in a conundrum also with the fact that you stated a blanket statement of not knowing, and I can appreciate sincerely your honesty because I love that about you. And but however, when you put out a statement that, this is what my thoughts are, but I don't have a rational understanding of how to express it so that you would get it at this point in time, it leaves an impression on mine. And I say that lovingly. I hope it sounded lovingly because I don't know. Okay, love you. Bye bye.
Of course, Sister Talia. I appreciate you being honest with me. And to your last question first, I will say this. When we're studying the book of Revelation together and we're going through verse by verse. So I have two options. I can deceive you and say I understand, and I can give you an idea that I don't really believe. I'm sure I can cook up something that I can maybe pass off on most people in this room and they would accept it. Or I can just skip over that verse and say I don't know anything about this and move on. So I think both approaches would be dishonest. So we are studying the book of Revelation. So what I can do is give you my best understanding. Now, if it leaves people in a conundrum, what it leaves them to conclude is that I don't know everything, which is beautiful because I don't. That's what I hope people will understand, that I don't know everything. And it makes them understand that they have an opportunity to study for themselves, maybe come up with something better, or maybe find an answer to the problem. So when I look at the issue from all sides, I don't see any way that I could approach it other than the way I approach it. I mean, I can say I will study it some more. That goes without saying because I've been studying it and continue to study it. But no matter how much I study it, if I'm honest with myself, I don't have an answer. So if I don't, I just don't. And I could say, well, go and look at the Adventist interpretation, and if that makes sense to you, accept it. And that is what some people will end up doing. But at the same time, I will express my opinion that that is not a satisfactory answer for me. There are too many holes there, and that makes it something I can't accept. So, to the other question, um, my head. Somebody just give me a quick word reminder. The other question. Somebody quickly just give me a.
Ellen White.
Ah, yes, how could I forget? I don't remember, I don't recall saying in my presentation that Ellen White was a false prophet or she was not a prophet. I don't recall saying that. I never ever addressed that question. What I addressed is a question of is Revelation 12:17 talking about Ellen White? That's the question. And absolutely, with a very clear conscience and with deep conviction, I will tell you Revelation 12:17 is not speaking about Ellen White. That's the point I made. There's something else that I also would comment on. It may be a little irrelevant, but since you mentioned it, I will comment on it. You say that in every generation there was a prophet, and I don't agree with you. Between the time of Malachi and John the Baptist, it is a historical fact that there was no prophet for about 600 years, and that was in ancient Israel where prophets came up every few years. For 600 years before the coming of Christ, there was no prophet until John the Baptist came. It's also probably true that during the Dark Ages, there were no prophets. I don't know of anybody that we can look at in that time and say this was a prophet. So to say that there was always a prophet in every generation and to say because of this, Ellen White must have been a prophet as one reason, I wouldn't agree with that. However, I would not be one of the persons at this point who would say Ellen White was not a prophet or she was a false prophet. I have never said this, and I'm not prepared to say it now, but I'm prepared to say that everything that I believe and teach is based on the Bible and not on Ellen White. So that is how I would respond to that, Sister Talia.
Brother David.
Um, one, let me go in the order I have here, Sister Elizabeth. I have Brother Ken next, and then I'll come to you afterwards.
Quite a few hands up.
All right. Yes, I just wanted to comment on.
You're low, Brother Ken. Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. No, I just wanted to comment on the gift of prophecy being the most desired gift and the gift that comes in the end, because it when you were talking about it, it just came to me that prophecy is the closest or the best form of communication we have this side of eternity with God, right? All the prophets had more of a personal communion with God. So I can see that being, the most desirous and the most, the one that's given with the most, or spoken of, or given with the most reverence, or with the most, um, I can't think of the word, but anyway, I think you know what I mean. But to me, it's the closest to actually speaking with God face to face is, the relationship between the prophet and God. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Brother Ken. I appreciate the thought. I see after Sister Elizabeth, I see Brother Ian and then Sister Talia again. So, Sister Elizabeth, go.
This message is for Sister Talia. There's scripture in the Bible to support where we are in time now, and that is Hebrews 1 and 2, which says,
God who at sundry times and in divers manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the world.
All right, thank you, Sister Elizabeth. I suppose we could start an argument about what that means too, but I will leave it there. Brother Ian and then Sister Talia.
Yeah, I just want to say I have a song to sing before you close, before the prayer.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. We will appreciate that. Sister Talia, go ahead. Maybe that was inadvertent putting up of hands. All right, Brother Ian, you can go ahead.
We are living, we are dwelling in a grand and awful time. In an age is telling, to believe in is sublime. Hark the waking up of nations, Gog and make up to the fray. Hark, what sounded is creation, groaning for her latter day. Christian rose and armed for conflict, nervy for the battlefield. There the helmet of salvation and the mighty gospel shield. Let the breastplate peace be on thee, take the Spirit's sword in hand. Boldly, fearless, we'll go forth and in Jehovah's strength to stand. And the prince of evil spirit, great deceiver of the world, he who at the blessed Jesus once his deadly weapons hurled, cometh with unwanted power, knowing that his reign will cease when the kingdom shall be given to the mighty Prince of Peace. Christian rose, fight in this warfare, cease not till the victory's won. Till your captain loud proclaimeth, servants of the Lord, well done. He alone who thus is faithful, who abideth to the end, hath a promise in the kingdom and eternity to spend.